Thanks, Thomas. That's
Thanks.
great. And thanks, Piers, as well. It's super interesting. And I love this, the way you describe yourself as a terrible maker, because I'm a terrible maker. And but the reason we go to work every day is maybe to slay our dragons. And, that's it keeps us going. I'm going to just request, like, we've also got kind of internet that's coming and going, and we don't have good phone reception here. So, could I just stop my video, or should I keep it going for a bit and see if it works?
It's going fine at the moment. We'll
Okay.
stop it if it's not going fine,
Okay.
or just tell us to stop it and we can do that.
So, Beth, Naeem, we run Studio Propolis. For the last 15 years, we've been based in Nairobi, and we've just moved and trying to set up a new workshop and studio in Warrington. But in Kenya, our work has been super varied, from making furniture to prototyping to product design to joinery work to architecture work and everything in between. So we'll talk a bit about that. So, the thing is, when we first set up in Kenya and going out there, as designers, we were confronted by this gap between what we designed and what we could get built. And that's been one of the great challenges, is how to negotiate that. It's maybe slightly unusual for architects to get very, very involved in the fabrication of everything they're doing, but we were in a context with very limited resources, and you're in an environment with a very disrupted supply chain as well. So, this linear path of procurement where we think we can draw something and expect some and create a design package that you think will get fabricated perfectly and delivered, it doesn't work. So from the outset, we realized we had to get really involved. If we were cared about the outcome of our project, we had to get very involved in the process of what we were doing. So to give you a bit of context, I mean, Nairobi has got a well-established industrial kind of sector as well. But often these industrial processes don't filter down into other parts of the economy. And I guess similar, as is the case with many developing parts of the world, there is this other parallel economy that exists that it's quite very much about what, like Piers is talking. There's this rich culture of improvisation and ingenuity that uses limited resources extremely innovatively, and that improvises around everyday building contingencies also creatively. And so often on a building project, you see as you're designing something, it's also being resolved as you kind of are going on. How then do we as designers tap into using whatever level of craftsmanship we have available, whatever materials we have available, whatever they are, and how do we respond to these local conditions and see them as opportunities rather than a problem, and see them as possibilities? And then as architects, whatever context we are in, whether it's Britain or Kenya, how does our context shape our terms of engagement? So for us, we had to widen our remit, wear many hats, start learning how to make things, and explore all aspects of how we design and make things. So this circle, this is kind of trying to explain to my mother how we work, because she is always confused what we do when we go to the workshop every day. But it's about this idea that as you learn new skills, whatever they are, whether they are how you collaborate with people or learning to weld, or it's learning new skills allows you to start to think through these skills that you learn, and the output of one project has a generative effect on the next project, and this process, this iteration or positive feedback loop, is what we call crafting exchange. And for us, it's a really important part in how we are constantly trying to improve and evolve the way we practice. So, for us, this also allows us to work on different projects, different scales, and it allows us to earn a living. Furniture projects are much quicker than architecture projects. It also allows us to take on design a project at large, but take away components that we are going to fabricate in the workshop on our own separately. And it brings an efficiency to that system as well. So, okay.
Yeah, so this is our workshop in Nairobi. It's a place that we love working in. We've obviously spent a ton of time there, but it's allowed us to sort of to really work with and understand local materials and tolerances and supply chains. I guess it's allowed us to make a lot of products as well and pieces, but we think the real value of this kind of hands-on approach that we have followed and actually trying to design using the space of our workshop is the kind of agency that it gives us. Like, for example, as architects, we're interested in communicating ideas with people, and that's kind of the nature of what we have to do. But when we work through the workshop, we're not limited to kind of conventional drawings and models, and what we draw, so to speak, can take on a whole number of different forms. Like, for example, like making jigs and templates that can allow other people's work to fit into ours, or vice versa. Yeah, so some of the work that we've done, we started kind of small, and in different ways our projects are kind of grown in scale, starting with stuff like bespoke furniture, small pieces, and that has then had the potential to expand, designing some collections we did with IKEA. And this is interesting, I think, in that this kind of hands-on approach that we kind of follow, like here we're making little bits, models, maquettes in clay, live in a meeting at the IKEA space, but we're dealing with this huge organization that communicates and designs through 3D modeling in SolidWorks. And suddenly, they're all kind of looking like, well, these guys are making something out of clay. What are they doing? But it can still be relevant, this way of working, and bring a value to this process. With this, working with all of these people on products that are going to be mass produced at a very tight budget and be made all over, to be sold all over the world. So yeah, I'm just going to skip that one. And then here, this is a stage set and some puppets that we made for a musical that went to Broadway. And we made the stage set first in Nairobi. There was a Nairobi show, and that first iteration became like a prototype and a set of samples and templates that then the New York studio could replicate on their side. And then all of our small pieces traveled out there as well. And then building our own house, where we've literally done everything from, unpicking, selective demolition, salvaging bits of the old building that can then define what we rebuild. So that's a very careful process. We had to cut an old tree on site, so milling that, drying it so that we can use it to make kitchen cabinets. Or for it then, I guess, working with all the offcuts that we've saved from our workshop for years and years of cutting up bits of wood. But it's been a real kind of testing ground for different techniques of building and details, but most of all, like as a prototype for how we can work.
So this is just a project we did a few years ago. It's actually, the building was designed by John McCaslin and partners, but we did a lot of the interior of the building. And so just to give you a cathedral in the west of Kenya. So we worked on all the furniture, the pews. There was a whole family of pieces, from making one-off commissions of like the cathedral, like actually cutting our own veneer because you can't buy veneer, and, kind of making the stacking chair to bespoke kind of candles, and carving marble to make holy water fonts. But the piece I want to kind of talk about is is actually probably the doors, which were the most tricky of all of them, because, you know, for us, it was how we use an example of how we use our workshop to design in, but also a way of the little kind of little steps that we can take using our workshop to allow and absorb different people's design thinking and other people's ways of making into our own work. So, I mean, the doors were, you know, even for us, they were a challenge. We'd never made doors like this before. Each door is about 700 kilos. The specialist artwork, which is kind of slightly imperfect, had to fit into a more precise opening. And then our doors also had to fit into quite imprecise openings that the contractor was making. And it's how to negotiate these relationships. So, I mean, you have to produce drawings, but, you know, to produce drawings, we always start in the workshop first, making models. So, for example, you know, am I going to use 2mm steel, 3mm steel? What can I lift? What can I carry? How does the weld show? How can I hide all the joints? And then, you know, you start to resolve ideas, you start to impose more aesthetic demands on yourself. Like, can we tailor this in a way that you fabricate it without putting a grinder to the piece at all? You know, it looks so much more magical that way. But this is such an important part of how you do that. But once we resolve these ideas ourselves, we can start to look at how we work with the people around us, sourcing locally, all the raw material made in Kenya, sourced locally, bits fabricated all around our workshop. We're in a very big industrial, kind of heavy industrial area. And the people we work with are on our doorstep, on our way to work. We're not buying stuff off Amazon, you know? And that gives us a lot of pleasure to work with people this way. And so then it starts to go together in our workshop and clamping up like we would bits of wood, and then integrating bits of bespoke ironmongery that we've got made, you know, that starts to come together. But then the critical interface in how our big doors, so it's all about negotiations of tolerance and relationships with people. So this is then the hinge becomes the relationship with how do we negotiate the fit between us and the contractor. So you buy this hinge, you buy it off the shelf, the manufacturer's absolved himself of how you fit it, but the contractor's making this opening. We have to make the doors in parallel. The site is 5 hours away. We have to be sure that what we're making is going to fit. And we didn't have time for him to make it and then come and measure and try and kind of, because the Vatican was sending their party to consecrate the building. So, you know, we have to hack the hinge, you know, and refabricate it in our workshop to kind of make it adjustable. So, I mean, this is what we've done to our old machines, or this is what we do to Japanese cars when they come to Kenya. You have to tropicalize them to kind of make them work on our roads. So that's the process we go through. But this is also a way of us setting up a negotiation that means when we get to site and if it doesn't fit, there's no confrontation, you know, you're mitigating arguments with people. And then this is how it starts to go together. But then also for the artwork, similarly, it's just very simple templates, jigs, you know, because also then the artwork had a lot of processes that went through, and, you know, to cast these using lost wax. Each panel was made in 6 panels and then all fabricated together. But the point is that with all these shrinkages and distortions, you know, one has to appreciate the tolerances involved. And, you know, when you are working with people who've got absolutely no concept of architectural tolerance because their work has never had to fit into anyone else's, or they don't even have a measuring tape, what do you do? So for us, it's not about trying to change someone, but what can we do to change the way we work to allow other people's work to fit into ours? So for us, like, the definition of tolerance becomes a way of absorbing other people's design thinking into our own thinking, and it makes us much more flexible as people to try and work like that. Oh, sorry, I'll just go back and let Beth take over. So those are the finished tools.
Yeah, so we wanted to show another project here, and really this time exploring how we use our small workshop to have an impact on a bigger project. This was a new build studio for an artist in Nairobi, which we recently completed. We were the architects on the project, but we also made all the doors and the windows and the joinery work. But we often work on different parts of buildings. But here we had a bigger opportunity to work and to treat this project as a complete work and combine the design and the pieces that we could make with local skills like the terrazzo, in situ terrazzo that you see there. But going as far as, you know, we grew all of the plants for the project and we got really involved, and we feel like this kind of care and involvement can bring a very different life to the materials and spaces. And it gives us a lot of joy to be able to craft elements for a project like this at different scales and to work in this quite intimate way with the client and with the contractor. But we want to show you how we went a little bit further with the project as well, with a detail that allowed us to work in another way of bringing you know, an extra level to our kind of engagement. The building itself sits up on stilts, and this makes the bottom edge very visible. And we really felt we had to try and minimize the potential for imperfections on what's quite a long building. And that it would have been quite difficult for the contractor to make in situ on site all of the formwork for that edge very accurately. So we proposed this curved precast repeatable element to mitigate against that. The project engineer that we worked with has a fabrication setup, and he was already making all of these precast waffles that we use for the slab of the roof and the floor. So in discussion with him, we developed this piece that he could make and supply to the contractor to make this clean edge of the building. So the formwork that we made in our workshop became a tool that could give us control over that condition and the quality of the building work on site. But above and beyond that, really, it helped us and allowed us to employ a local solution to the problem, employing local fabrication and materials and the builders themselves. So using our workshop like this, we find can result in a form of exchange then that opens up different possibilities of working together and collaborating with a whole different set of people in a way that's to everybody's advantage. So as we look ahead now to the next phase of our studio we're starting to set up in the UK, we find ourselves looking back at this diagram and asking again and thinking again what it means to respond to local conditions. Just as an example, you know, we've been buying big woodworking machines to set up our workshop, and you know, we've really sort of discovered this whole, you know, community of amazing small-scale engineers. That means that we can buy these fantastic old machines and get them completely rebuilt so that they're way better than the new machines that we can make. And there's such a fantastic kind of sustainability and everything about that process as well. And so, you know, we start to see that our new context can shape our engagement with different people and collaborators and workshop. But just as importantly for us, you know, we have to think about what we actually enjoy doing. We really hate sitting every day in front of a computer doing CAD, but at the same time, we don't want to be in the workshop, like churning out factory-produced pieces of furniture. And we see design as a physical activity, and it works best when we can bring together the workshop and the studio. So thinking again about the idea of crafting exchange and taking it to sort of encompass everything that we might want to do. So these are just a few ideas really that we have thought about over the years and talked about we have ongoing furniture and architecture work. We're setting up our workshop, but how can we bring new things? Hopefully some of these other ideas can start to feed into the things that we already do. I mean, like a residency program or something, but even like web-based platforms that can allow us to engage with other people in different places, different makers. Like we really see, just like this whole thing today, the platform can really it's highlighted possibilities of cross-fertilization and potential to be involved even in work in Kenya that we never thought would still be possible, I hadn't imagined before. So yeah, we're most of all looking forward to using our workshop to explore different ideas and ways forward. Yeah,
that's really, really fantastic, guys. And I love that idea of the crafting exchange and kind of, I suppose that cross-fertilization. I really like the way that you're making the jig making, and how that's a kind of an exchange through the jig between kind of design.
Yeah, I mean, it goes beyond a drawing, and it's an instruction that can be sort of, it's an interactive thing, it can be modified, it can be, that can be hacked by the person who's using it as well for their own purposes. And yeah, it's a kind of, it's a much more egalitarian way, I think, of interacting with people. Yeah.
There's an interesting question here in the comments of someone saying, what advice would you give to those who aspire or are just starting to set up a workshop and a maker spaces? Because you're investing into and maintaining tools and machines and can be expensive and hard to fund. I mean, I think you've answered,
it's an interesting
in some ways, but I think
we were actually very lucky when we bought our machines, driving around Northumberland, buying them as scrap metal. And we just suddenly shocked at the price of the secondhand machinery market at the moment. So one of the things I would be really interested in doing is working at, not as a maker space, but as a more co-working space with what we're setting up. And like, why do we need to all double up our infrastructure? All of these machines can be shared, and whoever that person is, get in touch as well. Like, I mean, if you want any tips, but
I mean, I think we were fortunate in a way to get some experience when we were starting out working for other people, but that was really like vital in our kind of progress. And we found, I went and swept floors in a workshop until, somebody gave me a bit of sanding to do. And it kind of, sometimes you have to start at that level, and somebody will give you a chance if you're keen enough,
Yeah.
I think someone's just posted a link as well to Black Horse Workshop, which I think is in London, where I believe that's a kind of shared studio, but which I think sounds amazing. Someone else saying maybe 20th century centralized, highly industrialized and mass-produced production was just a passing phase. Which I kind of
well, I think the evolution of technology allows it to be a passing phase as well. There's so many different opportunities.
Yeah, I'm just actually also realizing that's my dad who said that, so he's watching. Hello. I think we'll move on now, because it'd be great to get a kind of joint conversation going at the end. So